The sun had barely risen over the decimated cityscape, casting an eerie glow on the ruined remnants of what was once a thriving metropolis. Ash floated in the air like snow, a stark reminder of the chaos that had unfolded. The world, once brimming with life, had become a battlefield, a battleground for survival, for power, and for the future of humanity itself. Dr. Evelyn Harper stood on the roof of the last standing building, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Her heart pounded in her chest, not just from the physical toll of surviving this nightmare, but from the weight of the responsibility she bore. Humanity's last hope rested on her shoulders, and she had no idea she was strong enough to carry it. Her mind raced back to the day everything changed. It had started as a whisper, a warning that no one had paid attention to, a cryptic message buried beneath layers of conspiracy theories and false alarms. The erasure. The world had dismissed it as a hoax, something far-fetched and impossible. But then, the first explosion, the first strike against human civilization. A global network, once united, fell apart in a matter of days. It didn't take long for chaos to spread. The earth had been fractured into factions. Nations fought amongst themselves, governments collapsed, and military forces turned against their own people. The people of the world had no leader to turn to. The weak were silenced, the strong grew more brutal, and the battle for the future became a race to control the remnants of power. And now, amidst the ruins of a dying world, Dr. Harper was tasked with the impossible. "Evelyn," a voice crackled through her comms. "Status report." It was Jacob, her trusted ally and the last remaining member of the resistance group, the Vanguard. He had been with her through every step of this journey, and they had both seen enough bloodshed to last 10 lifetimes. But now, their fight was different. This wasn't just about survival. This was about stopping a force far more dangerous than anything they had ever faced. "The mission is still a go," Evelyn replied, her voice steady despite the chaos raging inside her. "But we don't have much time. The council is closing in, and if we don't act fast, we lose everything." Jacob's voice hardened. "You're sure it's there? The source of the power?" Evelyn didn't need to answer. She had seen it with her own eyes, felt its pull. Deep beneath the city, hidden in the heart of the ruins, lay the weapon they needed to turn the tide of the war. It wasn't just any weapon. It was the last known relic of a forgotten age, a weapon that could reshape the future of the planet. If they could reach it before their enemies did, there might be hope. If not, humanity was doomed to extinction. She took a deep breath, scanning the horizon once more. Her fingers clenched around the map she had received, a digital blueprint of the underground complex where the weapon was hidden. "The underground facility is about 5 clicks from your current position," Jacob continued. "The Council's forces are already mobilizing. You will have to move quickly." Evelyn didn't reply immediately. Instead, she turned toward the crumbling stairwell behind her and took the first step down into the depths of the building. Every move she made, every decision, every breath, felt heavier than the last. But there was no turning back now. She had committed herself to this mission, and the world, or what was left of it, depended on her. The sound of boots echoed in the distance. The Council's forces were closing in faster than she had anticipated. She quickened her pace. Evelyn knew the risks. The deeper she ventured into the city, the more dangerous it became. The streets were a war zone, a battleground where death lurked behind every corner. The Council had eyes everywhere. Their soldiers were relentless, and their reach extended far beyond anything Evelyn had ever imagined. If they caught wind of her mission, it would be the end of the line. She reached the base of the building and slipped into the shadow of a nearby alley. Her pulse quickened as she peered around the corner, assessing the situation. The streets were eerily quiet. Too quiet. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed in the distance, the unmistakable sound of military vehicles. "They're here," Evelyn whispered under her breath. Her hand instinctively reached for the weapon holstered at her side. A small, sleek pistol designed for close combat. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. She crouched low, moving with a stealth she hadn't used in years. Each step was calculated, deliberate. The last thing she needed was to be spotted. A small group of Council soldiers passed by her position. They were talking, unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows. Evelyn's heart raced as she held her breath, waiting for the perfect moment to slip past them. Then, in a split second, a gunshot rang out. The soldiers scattered in panic, their voices fading as they scrambled for cover. Evelyn didn't wait. She darted into the chaos, using the confusion to her advantage. Her pulse thrummed in her ears as she sprinted toward the underground entrance. It was only a matter of time before the council realized she was here. But the truth was, Evelyn wasn't running away from the council. She was running toward the one thing that could save or destroy them all. She reached the entrance to the underground facility and slid her hand over the old security panel. The rusted metal groaned as the door slowly creaked open. Inside, darkness awaited her. This was the beginning of an impossible journey. A journey where humanity's future rested in the hands of a few, and the cost of failure meant total annihilation. Evelyn's fate, and the fate of the entire world, now hinged on her ability to find the weapon hidden deep beneath the city. The battle had only just begun. The underground complex loomed before her, a labyrinth of steel and concrete that had been buried beneath the city for decades. Evelyn stepped cautiously through the rusted doorway, her mind buzzing with both fear and determination. The faint hum of an ancient generator vibrated through the walls, the only sound that broke the suffocating silence. She had no idea what awaited her inside. The facility had been abandoned long ago, but it wasn't just its physical abandonment that worried her. No one knew exactly what the weapon was. The blueprints were old, their data corrupted, and the few survivors who had once ventured into this place had never returned. But Evelyn had no choice. Time was running out, and she couldn't let the council, or anyone else, get their hands on the weapon. If they did, the last vestiges of humanity would be doomed to extinction. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn activated her flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness. The walls around her were lined with old machinery, some of it flickering with what little power remained. Her boots echoed off the cold, concrete floors as she descended deeper into the complex, the air thick with dust and the scent of decay. "Jacob, I'm inside," she whispered into her comms, her voice barely audible. Moving deeper. Her only response was a crackling static. She paused, listening. The faintest sound of footsteps reached her ears, sending a chill down her spine. Her pulse quickened. The council's soldiers had already begun their hunt. She knew they wouldn't stop until they found her. A sudden burst of static interrupted the silence again, followed by Jacob's voice. "Evelyn, stay sharp. We're detecting movement around the perimeter. You need to hurry." Evelyn didn't need any more encouragement. She quickened her pace, her flashlight dancing over the walls as she navigated the winding corridors. Each turn she took brought her deeper into the heart of the complex. The map she had was vague, but it was the only guide she had. As she moved forward, Evelyn felt the weight of her mission. This wasn't just about finding a weapon. This was about saving humanity from the brink of destruction. The council, the factions, the endless war, it was all part of the same tragic reality. The world had become a place where power and control mattered more than anything else. But if she could find this weapon, everything could change. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of winding through dark hallways, Evelyn found herself standing before a massive metal door. It was unlike any she had seen before, its surface marked with strange symbols she didn't recognize. Her heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the place where the weapon was supposed to be hidden. She took a step forward, but before she could touch the door, a sudden flash of light blinded her. It was too bright, too intense, and it caught her completely off guard. Her hand instinctively reached for her weapon, but before she could draw it, the light flickered out as quickly as it had appeared. A voice, deep and robotic, echoed through the chamber. "Access denied." Evelyn froze. The voice wasn't human. It wasn't even a normal AI. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. The voice replied, its tone cold and emotionless. "You are not authorized to enter. Step away from the door." Evelyn's mind raced. The door had to open. There was no other way. Her eyes scanned the room for anything that could help, any clue, any control panel, any lever. Nothing. She felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. But then she remembered something, a detail from the blueprints. The original designers of this place had been obsessed with security, but they had also been cautious, knowing the dangers that lurked in their creation. They'd installed a back door, a secret bypass for those who could solve the puzzle. Evelyn wasn't sure she could trust the old maps, but it was the only option. She stepped back, putting her back against the cold metal of the hallway, and began to scan the walls for any markings that would guide her. There, a small panel hidden beneath the dust, just out of sight. She approached it carefully, prying it open with a piece of metal she had found earlier. Inside, the panel was old, covered in dirt and grime, but the wires appeared intact. She connected a small device from her belt to the panel, and within seconds, the room lit up with a soft glow. A sequence of numbers flashed across the panel, a password prompt. Evelyn's mind raced as she typed in the code she had memorized from the blueprints. The old designs were outdated, but if they still worked, she would be able to get past this hurdle. The door system hummed, and the robotic voice echoed once more. Password accepted. Access granted. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She pushed open the door and stepped into the chamber beyond. What she saw inside took her breath away. It was an enormous room, far larger than she had anticipated, and the center of it was dominated by a massive device, ancient but unmistakably powerful. The weapon. It looked like nothing she had ever seen before. There were no guns, no missiles, no traditional instruments of warfare. This weapon was something else, something far more destructive. It was a machine, but not in the way Evelyn understood machines. It hummed with an energy she could feel vibrating through the floor, its shape something between organic and mechanical. The walls around the chamber were covered in strange symbols, the same ones that had been etched onto the door. Her hand hovered over the activation switch, but before she could make a move, a voice filled the room. It was a voice she had not expected to hear. "You're too late, Dr. Harper." Evelyn spun around, her heart skipping a beat. There, standing in the shadows, was a figure she recognized all too well. General Alistair Kane, the man who had once been the face of the rebellion, the man she had trusted with the fate of humanity, and now, the man who had betrayed them all. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat as General Alistair Kane stepped forward from the shadows. His cold, calculating gaze met hers, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. The man she had once trusted, the man who had once stood by her side as they fought against the Council's tyranny, now stood as her greatest threat. "Kane!" Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. What are you doing here?" A twisted smile curled on Kane's lips as he stepped closer, the light from the machine casting long shadows across his face. "You didn't think it would be that easy, did you, Evelyn?" His voice was calm, almost mocking. "The weapon you've been searching for, it was never meant to be used by the likes of you." Evelyn's mind raced. "No, you can't be serious. You were part of the Vanguard. You promised to help us rebuild." Kane's eyes darkened, his posture rigid. The Vanguard was always a fool's dream, a failed experiment in idealism. "I gave up on that nonsense long ago." His voice grew colder, more venomous. "And as for rebuilding, well, let's just say I found a better way." Evelyn's fingers tightened around her weapon, but she didn't draw it. Not yet. She had to think. Kane was dangerous, a seasoned military leader, but he was also unpredictable. She had known him well, trusted him once. But now, standing before her, he seemed like a completely different man. His betrayal hit harder than anything she had ever faced. "Why, Kane?" she demanded, her voice breaking through the tension. "Why turn on us? On humanity?" A low laugh escaped him. "Turn on humanity? No, Evelyn, I'm saving humanity. You and your precious Vanguard are delusional. The world is already broken. It's too late to save it with ideals and dreams. What the Council offers is power, control, and the ability to reshape this world into something new." Evelyn's stomach churned. The Council. They had always been ruthless, but Kane had never spoken like this before. This was something different. This was a man who had lost his way completely. "You think you can control that weapon?" Evelyn asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "You don't even know what it does. If you release it, everything will be destroyed." Kane's smile widened. "Oh, I know exactly what it does. And that's the point." The words hit Evelyn like a physical blow. "What?" she breathed. "You're going to use it? Destroy what's left of humanity?" He stepped closer, the cold gleam in his eyes growing sharper. "The weapon isn't about destruction, Evelyn. It's about evolution. We can use it to rebuild the world, to bend it to our will, to create a new order, one where I am in control. No more chaos, no more petty rebellions, only power. And you—" He paused, his gaze flicking over her with cold amusement. "You're too late. You were always too weak to understand." Evelyn's mind spun. This wasn't just about power. This was madness. Cain had always been ambitious, but this was something far worse. He had become a puppet of the council, twisted by their promises of control and order. And now, he planned to use a weapon to enforce his will upon the world. "I won't let you do this," Evelyn said, her voice hardening with resolve. She took a step back, reaching for her weapon. She knew she couldn't trust him, not anymore. If he activated the weapon, everything they had fought for would be lost. Cain's laughter echoed in the chamber, and for a moment, Evelyn felt a wave of doubt wash over her. Was she too late? Had she miscalculated? Her mission had been so clear: find the weapon, stop the council, and save humanity. But now, everything was falling apart. "You can try to stop me," Cain said, his voice dripping with contempt. "But it won't matter. The weapon is already activating." Evelyn's eyes widened in shock. She glanced back at the machine in the center of the room. The energy pulse that had once been faint was now growing stronger, the machine humming with a low, menacing sound. Sparks crackled from its surface, and the symbols on the walls began to glow brighter. "No!" Evelyn shouted, her heart racing. She sprang forward, reaching for the control panel. But Cain was already there, his hand hovering over the activation switch. "Step aside, Evelyn," he warned, his voice cold. "This is the only way." Evelyn's mind raced. She had to think. She couldn't let him activate the weapon. But Cain was a trained soldier, and she was only one woman. The odds were against her. Without thinking, she lunged toward him, her body moving faster than she had expected. Cain barely had time to react before she slammed into him, knocking him away from the control panel. They crashed to the floor, both scrambling for the weapon at their side. Cain was faster. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it painfully. "You always were stubborn," he spat. "But you'll learn. This is the end." Evelyn gritted her teeth, fighting against the pain in her arm. She reached for her gun, pulling it free from its holster. But before she could aim it, Cain slammed his elbow into her chest, sending her sprawling backward. The world around her seemed to slow, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she struggled to regain her footing. Cain stood above her, his face twisted in triumph. "You're too weak," he sneered, his eyes glowing with a cold fire. "Humanity deserves better than you, and the weapon will ensure it." Evelyn's mind was spinning. She couldn't let him win. She couldn't let him take control. But the weapon, the power it held, was beyond her understanding. Even if she destroyed it, would she really be stopping the end? Or was she just prolonging the inevitable? Her eyes darted around the chamber. There had to be a way. There had to be something she could do. Then her gaze fell on something, a small terminal near the back of the room, partially hidden behind some debris. It looked old, but it was still functional. If she could reach it, she might be able to shut down the machine before it was too late. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, Evelyn kicked Cain's leg out from under him, sending him sprawling to the floor. She scrambled to her feet, her hand reaching for the terminal. But before she could reach it, the ground shook violently. The machine had started to hum louder, the air growing thick with energy. Cain was already back on his feet, and he wasn't about to let her stop him. "You really think you can stop me?" Cain's voice was full of fury now. "This is over, Evelyn." Evelyn's fingers brushed the terminal's surface, activating a series of security protocols. The terminal buzzed alive, its screen flashing with information she barely understood. But it was a start. The air around them crackled with tension, each second feeling like an eternity. Evelyn's hand hovered over the terminal as she watched the data on the screen flash by, faster than she could comprehend. Cain's angry footsteps echoed behind her, and she could feel his presence closing in, his every breath filled with fury. "You think you can stop it? You're a fool, Evelyn," Cain spat, his voice seething with rage. "The weapon has already been activated. Nothing can undo that now." Evelyn didn't respond, her mind racing. The machine in the center of the room continued to hum, its energy surging, filling the chamber with a low, ominous vibration. Every fiber of her being screamed that she was running out of time. But there was a flicker of hope, a narrow window of opportunity. The terminal had given her a faint glimpse of the shutdown protocol, a failsafe buried deep within the system. If she could access it before Kane stopped her, she might be able to deactivate the weapon. Her fingers flew across the terminal's keypad, importing commands as quickly as she could. The screen flashed once more, and then the system responded with a sharp, high-pitched beep. The countdown had begun. "What's happening?" Kane demanded, his voice edged with panic. He moved closer, his hands reaching for her, but Evelyn wasn't about to let him take this from her. "Not now." "I've triggered the countdown," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was hammering in her chest. "You're not going to get away with this." Kane's eyes narrowed. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you're dealing with. The weapon isn't just a tool of destruction. It's a new beginning, a chance to reshape everything." Evelyn's mind flashed to the horrors she had seen in the cities, the suffering that had been inflicted by the Council, and the lives that had been lost in the wars that ravaged the world. Kane's words were poison. There was no new beginning for a world ruled by fear and oppression. And if he got control of the weapon, there would be nothing left to save. The countdown timer on the terminal flashed red, the numbers ticking down with an unforgiving rhythm. Every second that passed brought her closer to either victory or destruction. Evelyn turned back to face Kane, her eyes hardening. "I'm not letting you destroy what's left of humanity. I won't let you turn us into slaves to your delusions." Kane took a step forward, his hands shaking with barely contained fury. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed to get here. You think you can stop me? You think the Council will just let you walk out of here with the weapon?" Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she focused on the terminal, her fingers moving quickly as she navigated through the security protocols. The countdown was at 5 minutes. She needed more time, and she had no intention of giving Kane a chance to interrupt her. "You think you're the hero." Kane sneered. "You're just a pawn in a game you can't even begin to understand. If you want to stop me, you're going to have to do a hell of a lot more than press a few buttons." Evelyn's heart raced as she entered the final command. The room seemed to go quiet for a moment, the hum of the machine growing louder and more intense. The countdown was nearing its end, and she felt the weight of the decision she was about to make. If she failed, everything would be over. If she succeeded, it would change everything. Her breath caught in her throat. She hit the enter key. The terminal beeped once, then twice, and then the countdown halted. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, everything was still. Then the lights in the room flickered, the energy flow to the weapon began to diminish, and the machine's humming slowed. Kane's eyes widened in disbelief. "What have you done?" he hissed. Evelyn stood tall, her eyes never leaving the weapon. "I've stopped it." "No," Kane growled, taking a step forward. "You can't. You have no idea what you've done." Evelyn's fingers clenched into fists as the machine powered down. The lights in the chamber flickered one last time before going out entirely, leaving them in complete darkness. She didn't need to see Kane's face to know the rage he was feeling. But the silence was deafening, and Evelyn knew this wasn't over. The weapon might have been deactivated for now, but the battle was far from finished. Kane wouldn't give up so easily. "Get out of my way," Kane spat, his voice low and dangerous. "You've made a mistake you'll regret." Evelyn's heart raced, but she didn't move. "No, Kane, you've made a mistake. It's over." He didn't respond. Instead, he moved toward her, faster than she anticipated. She barely had time to react before he lunged, his fist striking out toward her. She dodged, but he caught her by the arm, his grip like iron. "You can't escape," he growled. "This isn't over. The Council will never let you go." Evelyn struggled to free herself, but Kane was relentless. She could feel her energy slipping away, the fatigue from the fight and the mission beginning to weigh her down. But she couldn't give up. Not now. Not when everything was at stake. With a burst of strength, Evelyn twisted in his grip, using his momentum against him. She slammed her elbow into his stomach, sending him stumbling backward. But before she could react, Kane recovered quickly, drawing his weapon with a speed that startled her. "You're going to regret this, Evelyn," he said, his voice cold and filled with malice. "The Council always gets what it wants." Evelyn's mind raced, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She knew she couldn't outrun him forever, and the more time they spent fighting here, the closer they came to losing everything. But there was one option left, one desperate move. The machine. The weapon may have been deactivated, but its core could still be used. She wasn't sure if it would work, but if she could access its power core, she might be able to use it against Kane. Without a second thought, Evelyn darted toward the machine, her body moving on pure instinct. Kane's shout echoed in the dark chamber, but she didn't turn around. She couldn't afford to. With a single leap, she reached the base of the machine. Her hands flew over the control panels, desperately searching for a way to tap into its energy source. Sparks flew as she pried open a panel, revealing a dark, pulsing core at its heart. The energy it radiated was unlike anything she had ever felt before. She could sense its power, its sheer potential. "Don't do it!" Kane screamed from behind her, his voice shaking with fury. "You don't know what you're tampering with." But it was too late. Evelyn knew this was her only shot. She reached into the machine's core, her hands trembling as she connected her device to it. The core responded instantly, the energy flowing through her like a jolt of electricity. She winced, the pain nearly unbearable, but she held on. The machine groaned, and then silence. The lights flickered back to life, the room illuminating once again. And this time, it wasn't just a weapon that was powered up. It was her. She turned toward Kane, her eyes burning with determination. "I'm not done yet." The room was bathed in harsh white light, flickering with an intensity that felt almost unnatural. Evelyn's hands were still trembling from the energy coursing through her, but her resolve had never been stronger. She could feel it now, the machine, its power surging through her veins. Kane had underestimated her. He had underestimated humanity's will to survive. She stood tall, turning slowly to face him. His expression was a mixture of disbelief and rage. The weapon was still dormant for now, but the power she had unlocked was now hers to command. The room felt alive with potential, like the calm before the storm. "You think this is over?" Kane snarled, his voice venomous as he raised his weapon, pointing it at her. "The Council will crush you. They'll—" Evelyn interrupted him, her voice calm but filled with the weight of everything that had led to this moment. "The Council will fool Kane. And you, too." Kane laughed bitterly, taking a step forward. "You think you can stop them? You think you can stop me? You're just one person, Evelyn. You're nothing compared to what's coming." "You've always been blind to the truth," she said, stepping forward herself, her voice cold but certain. "You think the weapon can give you control, that it can bend the world to your will. But you've forgotten one thing. The weapon was never meant for one person. It was never meant to be a tool of oppression." The energy from the machine hummed louder now, resonating in the very air around them. Evelyn felt its power, raw, untamed, and ready to be unleashed. It was a force of nature, something that could either create or destroy. The decision was in her hands. "You don't understand," Kane said, his face twisted in frustration. "I've seen the future. This is the only way. We'll rebuild the world, make it stronger. Under my control, humanity will flourish." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. She knew what he was really saying. "You're not trying to rebuild the world. You're trying to control it. You'll use this weapon to subjugate humanity to your will. That's not rebuilding, Kane. That's tyranny." Kane's gaze hardened, and in that moment, Evelyn saw something in his eyes that made her stomach churn, the deep corruption of someone who had lost themselves in the pursuit of power. Someone who had convinced themselves that their own vision of the world was the only one worth fighting for. "You're wrong," he hissed. "This is the only way." With that, he raised his weapon, preparing to fire. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't hesitate. She was already moving, her body acting before her mind could catch up. She had no choice but to stop him. The weapon had to be destroyed, or at least neutralized, before it could fall into his hands. The world slowed, the space between them closing in seconds. Kane fired, the sound of the blast deafening in the quiet chamber. Evelyn ducked, feeling the heat of the shot pass inches above her head. In that instant, everything she had been fighting for came rushing back to her. Her friends, the innocence caught in the chaos, the dream of a future without tyranny. She couldn't let it end here. She wouldn't. Evelyn reached for the control panel on the side of the room, her hand moving with precision, overriding every system she could find. The energy from the machine surged again, responding to her commands. Sparks flew from the console, but she didn't stop. Her pulse raced as she set the system to overload. Kane noticed too late. He charged toward her, but she was ready. With a quick swipe, she redirected the power back into the machine. The force sent Kane flying backwards, his weapon clattering to the floor. He scrambled to regain his footing, but it was already too late. Evelyn had activated the final sequence. The countdown was set. The machine's core began to pulse rapidly, its energy building to an intensity that made the room tremble. "No!" Kane screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "You'll destroy everything." Evelyn didn't answer. She couldn't afford to. The countdown was now beyond their control. The energy coursing through the chamber was too powerful, too volatile. In a final, desperate move, she turned her gaze toward the weapon's core. It was now or never. The machine erupted in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave was felt across the city, reverberating through the streets and buildings, shaking the very ground beneath Evelyn's feet. She shielded her eye from the blast, her body thrown backward by the force. The air crackled with an electric hum, the intense light fading as quickly as it had appeared. Evelyn blinked, her vision still blurry, but when it cleared, she saw the aftermath. The weapon was no more. The power had been neutralized. The machine now nothing more than a heap of twisted metal and broken circuits. The air felt different now, lighter, almost as if the very atmosphere had changed. Kane lay motionless on the ground, his body sprawled out among the wreckage. The weapon that had once been a symbol of unimaginable power had been destroyed, its threat finally extinguished. Evelyn stood over him, breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling with each breath. The weight of the moment settled in, and she knew that, for now, the world had been saved. But the war wasn't over. The Council's reach was vast, and their power was not so easily undone. Yet, for the first time in a long while, Evelyn allowed herself to hope. The battle wasn't won by one person, nor was it won by a single weapon. It was won by the strength of those who had fought for a better world, those who had never given up, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The world would rebuild, not under control of one man, but by the hands of many. And that, Evelyn knew, was a true victory.